it's good to see everybody here this morning, especially our visitors, your honored guests. I want you to come back every opportunity you have. I guess I can go ahead and say also that I received a lot of birthday cards. I want to say thank you to so many who send birthday cards. However, I did receive one sympathy card. And then and I won't say her, I'll just say her initials, Alta. Then she sent me Chopin's Death March on my message. It's nice being loved. I think we view cultures a little bit differently than we maybe should have. Very much inundated in being in this culture, we kind of perceive it a certain way and with a certain viewpoint. And it's interesting that cultures are really not that much different. They've always been a certain way, and when it comes to Christianity and how it fits in a culture, that hasn't changed since dirt. God's people have always been a little different or a lot different, depending on the culture. And there's a lot of pushback from that. And so it's not a surprise when you go to Acts 4, and by the way, our text picks up in Acts 4:13, picks up in the middle of an event. This event started all the way back at the beginning of chapter 3, where John and Peter go into the temple and they do a miracle. There's a guy sitting there begging alms, and he can't walk. Everybody knows him. Everybody knew he was there, knew why he was there. And all of a sudden, as Peter and John go into the temple, here's this guy jumping and leaping on these legs that weren't any good before. And Peter immediately says, you guys are looking at us like we did this, like we're somebody. That ain't the case. We did this because of Jesus and the faith that we're preaching about who he is, the Son of God. And so therefore, in a public forum in chapter 4, verse 5, there's all the authorities are there, Annas, Caiaphas, John, Alexander, and all, everybody that's somebody that got the memo and said you're somebody is there to challenge them. And what is interesting about it is in verse 7, and by the way, this is just a little bit of a rabbit. Let me get you to appreciate this point. Nearly everybody that you will discuss religion with understands a simple, basic principle about faith. It has to have some authority somewhere. Because see, that's where, and it's funny watching debates between deists and atheists. Because one of the weak spots is, if I'm God, because that's what you're claiming when you're an atheist, I'm all there is that is, and I'm the boss of me, and I'm the boss of everything about me, and I'm somebody. And of course, some mugger with a 45 can fix that little arrogance real quick like to explain you're not God. There's somebody greater than you, so the deist has the edge on that argument. But everybody understands there's got to be some authority. Now, what the authority is, that sometimes is the disagreement, and sometimes how you perceive and understand the authority, that's sometimes the disagreement. But what I wanted to look at is something that I just don't understand, especially looking at the manifestations of having a lack of authority for so much. I know that there is no doubt that people who are genuine Christians have the desire to spread the gospel, and they know they're up against it with people who would rather not hear it. There is a persecution that comes naturally from telling somebody you're wrong. We've got a joke in our family every now and then. Guys get that, some of these men, which the women just walk off and just roll their eyes, but we kind of discuss things on occasion. And one of the jokes we have is after having made some long logical discussion about how my point is right, the respondent stands there and goes, okay, all right, but you're wrong. Nobody wants to hear that. And particularly when it is something so incredibly important as where you're going to spend eternity, whether it's in heaven or in hell. That matters. And so all of a sudden the weight of a discussion about you're wrong really makes a difference. And so these guys were not happy with what Peter and John was saying, because they were telling them, y'all killed Jesus and he was God's son. That's a big whoops. You're in trouble here. And so you would expect pushback. And that's what they were getting. But you know, for years and years, and I understand the conviction people have for wanting to spread the gospel, understanding there's going to be pushback. And so what do? And the mantra has always been, we need a program. And I'm not a program guy. Okay? I don't make any apology for it. I don't think programs help. I sat on the porch, talked to one of the elders, used to be an elder here many years ago. And we discussed the fact of all the programs that had been done in this congregation right here with the youth and the buses and on you go about the programs. And then we look at the church that's here and ask the question, how many people in those programs that were involved in those programs are here now? And they're not. And I'm telling you right now, programs is not the way to go. I'm of the opinion, and it's my opinion, however, I'm about to show you scriptures where this is the case, that if we'll just follow the examples that we have been given in Scripture, then we'll have our program. And that's what this is. This morning is a program of how we're going to grow as a church. And the only way we can possibly grow as a church is if we go back to the Bible and we understand what the Bible teaches and how they did it at the very beginning of the church and why it is effective. And what we need to do, you and I as Christians, in order to make our teaching effective. Notice what it says when you begin in verse 13, because they're being challenged. And Peter and John are telling them, hey guys, there is no salvation, the verse before in 12, in any other but Jesus. That's it. You can't be saved in Moses. You got to go with Jesus. So here are some things I want to encourage you to adopt in your lives as Christians if you want us to grow here. Here's the evangelistic program. The first thing that I read when I see what was read just momentarily is that they saw the boldness of Peter and John. I despise cowardice. You ought to stand for something. If you stand for nothing, you'll stand for everything. You'll just put up with it all. Christians need to be convicted enough in their own soul that we need to do something to help others go to heaven. And if you don't believe that a person who will not do what God says and who doesn't even believe in God is going to be all right, I would ask you, why are you here this morning? Because if that's the case, then not one of us ought to be wasting our time, because that's what it is, being here in assembly, praising God, if you don't have to be held accountable. And so therefore, the first thing I think we ought to do is be brave. We need to be bold. Maybe it's because I'm getting a little older and I'm thinning out on my time some. And so I'm beginning to do things a little bit differently and being a little more solid. I had a Bible study this week. I was rather blunt. It was well received, I want you to know. I was pleasantly surprised. But even this morning before the Bible class, I called an old buddy of mine up in Maryland. And I harassed him one more time. And I'm not done. Because I love the man. And I don't want him to miss out on heaven. But if he continues to believe the flaws and the errors that he is believing and following, he's not going to make it. And I believe that, or I wouldn't be standing before you this morning. And that being the case, I believe we need more boldness. I don't know what it is that keeps you from speaking to people. I'm about to take one excuse away from you here in a minute. But I don't know whatever it is that keeps you from speaking to your friends and your family about what they ought to do in order to become a Christian. Put it away, put it aside. Erase that yellow stripe running down your back and find some courage. We need people who are bold, who will tell people, I love you, but you ain't right. And as I told one fellow this week, I'm not going to let you go to hell and be comfortable about it. Okay, I'm going to make your trip to hell miserable because I don't want you to be in eternal misery. I'm going to keep in front of you the fact that we need to be God's children. And if you're not God's child, it's going to be miserable. And if you think it's tough now in this old body we're living in, oh, you ain't seen nothing yet. going to a place where the fire is so hot it never ceases, and you're going to be suffering all the time. And what's worse, it's not a physical fire that burns something up and ends. It's going to keep going forever and ever. It's going to be one of those mental fires that never ceases. You don't want to be in that. And you're my friend, and I love you, and I don't want you to be in that. I know sometimes we don't speak to others because we don't think we know all the answers. Well, you're right. You don't. I have been doing this for a lot of years, and I still get asked questions, and I scratch my head, and, oh, by the way, I don't know, that's an answer. It's not the one you want, but it's an answer. But sometimes we have to say, I don't know, but let me find out, because if your soul hinges on knowing the answer to this question, I will do everything in my power to figure it out. And here's what they understood about these two fellows, Peter and John. They were bold, but they were uneducated and untrained men. Folks, you don't have to be a massive theologian. You don't have to know everything about philosophic thought in order to be effective in telling your neighbor, I love you and care about your soul, want you to go to heaven. There's no programs that replace that. You talking to who you know, especially those who know you. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But you don't have to be a doctor of theology in order to teach others about Christ. Do you know why you became a Christian? Just curious. Or do you know whether or not you are a Christian? If you do, you're qualified. You can tell somebody else, look, I did this because the Bible said to do this, and this is where I got it. Let me show you where it is, and you do it too, so we can all go to heaven together. They were bold, but they didn't have any degrees. They didn't have all this experience. This is all new. And so therefore, I don't care where you are maturity-wise as a Christian. If you're a Christian, you're qualified. But not only that, it's interesting to me. In fact, in the side of my margin in my Bible, in 2 places here, I have "ha" with an exclamation point. Sometimes I find things that are just funny to me, because these guys called them in and said, hey, what authority are you doing this for? We're going to get on you for that. But, and this is just hilarious to me, and seeing the man who had been healed standing with them while they're castigating them about this, they could say nothing against it. Yeah, it's tough when you got evidence there, isn't it? You know? Which I've never understood. People who claim, oh, y'all think you work your way into heaven. Works has nothing to do with it. All you got to do is believe and you're saved. All of that's never taught in the Bible. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read it out of the lengthy little section over here in Matthew 25. If you turn over there in Matthew 25, it talks about the judgment, okay? This is the context. It's about the judgment. And if you go down, he talks about separating the sheep and the goats. And here's the criterion by which we will be judged, okay? He's not going to get you up there at judgment seat and say, well, did you believe in me? And you say, well, yeah, I believe you, Lord. Oh, you're in, not a problem. No, I'm sorry, that's not what the Bible teaches. He would set the sheep on his right hand in verse 33, but the goats on the left. We all know what that's all about. Then the king will say to those on the right hand, come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry. Do what now? I had a problem and you helped me fix it. That's what this is all about. You did something. James laughs at it basically by telling him, what good does it do if somebody's hungry and you say, be warmed and filled. They're hungry and cold. And you say, be warmed and filled, and you don't do anything. Well, duh, that's no help. And here we're talking about judgment, because if you go all the way back to the end of that chapter, in verse 46, after he tells some folk, you did this and you did that, and that was good, and then he tells other folks, you didn't do anything, he says, that's when it's going to happen, that this separation is going to occur. And in verse 46, and these will go away, those who didn't do anything will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into everlasting life. What's the judgment based on? Whether or not I just believed in Jesus and he saved me and I had nothing to do? No, it's how you manifest what you did. That's what makes Acts 4:14 so funny. Because these guys were condemning them for speaking without authority. That was the implied assertion there. You don't have any authority to do this, yet here's the evidence. Now, want to ask you a question, and this is the one where it's going to sound like I'm slapping you, and I'm not intending to. I'm just asking a question. Can people tell you're a Christian? Is it so obvious that you're a Christian that you're different from people around you? Is it something that when they see you, they know by the way you act, the way you communicate, what you say, how you treat other people? Can they see, that's different than our culture? That's never been any different than what it is here and in our culture today. There it is, right there. Can they see that you're different? As a matter of fact, can they see that you're so different it scares them a little? This council got them together because, in fact, in verse 16, I have another hop with an exclamation point. They get all to themselves. In Hamilton city government, what they call this is executive session, because they don't want anybody else to know what they're doing. So they get off by themselves and they kick the rest of them out. And they said, what shall we do with these men? We got an issue here. They're telling us we killed Jesus, but he said, for indeed that a notable miracle has been done through them is evident to all who dwell in Jerusalem, and we cannot deny it. Okay, the evidence is there. These are Christians. You can't deny the evidence. So what are we going to do? Now, what was their fear? Why did they care? Why weren't they happy? Here's a guy that was crippled and now he's walking. Why wouldn't you be happy about that? Well, here's why. Look at verse 17. And my question to you as we read this is this. Are people in Hamilton scared to death of you as Christians? Because you might convert some people. You might have a church here that's growing, and you might be stealing folk from other denominations, all other religious organizations around here, and they might lose their money, because that's about half the time what it's about, and they might lose their people because we are living such a good life and teaching the truth with boldness. And it's God's truth, so we're not that smart, but we're smart enough to know what God says, and we're doing it to the effect that, oh no, it might spread, and that's what they're worried about, but so that it spreads no further among the people. Now, of course, that didn't work real well, because later on we find out in chapter 5, verse 14, just exactly what they were worried about was happening. Okay, here's your program that works, okay? With boldness, we speak the truth to people because we love their soul, and we're not waiting until we get way qualified so that we can answer every question in the book. But what we do in our lives speaks so loudly that we are different and unique as Christians, they got to stop and scratch their head and say, wow. And what happens is it spreads in in Acts 5:14, and believers were increasingly added to the Lord. That's what happens when you follow God's program and you do what God says to do. And by an approved example here, we have the program we ought to be involved in. See, we don't need to have a big meeting and give it a pretty name, a cutesy name that just rings and has good sales, numbers, and try to get some kind of equipment lined up and spend a bunch of money on that kind of stuff. No, you know what we need? We need Christians who are bold and love God and want people to go to heaven. That's what we need. That's the program. I know, it just sounds so simple. And it is, because God knew Jeff was kind of dumb, and he's going to need all the help he can get. And if he puts him into the field to work for his, as a servant of his, it can't be complex. It's got to be something simple so he can get it. I believe I've got it. We don't need a bunch of programs to spend a bunch of money on and hype it, and it's a flash in the pan. And I watched the tears roll down this elder's eyes as he thought about his past and what he had tried to do, I know, in the greatest of sincerity for the church right here in Park Heights. And said, it seems like it was all for nothing. Because all of those people that were involved, those young people involved in it, there's barely anybody still faithful. The programs that work, folk, is when you and me go out there to people we know and tell them, I love your soul. And I'm about to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm just way too bold. I'm getting into your social bubble. I'm going over the line a little bit. Okay, I understand. And I'm not qualified because I know a whole bunch is more than you, or I'm smart and you're not. That has nothing to do with it. What it has to do with is I live differently because of my Lord, and you should see it in my life, and so therefore I want you to go to heaven with me. That's the program. And yeah, you're going to get pushback. And I'll guarantee you, people are going to try to find every flaw that you could possibly think of, and they're going to appeal to authority. Well, that's what these guys did. You know, what authority are you doing this? Even we can't deny the evidence, but what authority? We're just going to hound you and beat you until you don't talk about it anymore. And Peter and John's response is classic, and it's the way we ought to think about our evangelism. Whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you more than God, you judge. For we cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard. My friends, if you're a Christian, you're qualified. You're able to teach someone else. I don't know what's keeping you from doing it. I don't know sometimes what keeps me from doing it when I ought to be saying something. And maybe that's why I had such a blunt conversation this week in a Bible study. Maybe that's why I called my old buddy from Maryland here this morning and talked to him and told him he'd be thinking serious about the hereafter. And I've got him thinking serious about the hereafter. He's caught up in something that isn't right. And I'm going to work on that too. We got an appointment this week to talk. But I've, passed a number here, and I even got a sympathy card to prove it. My time's limited. So is yours. And as I told a fellow this week, you drive out of this parking lot, and the way they drive up and down this road with those big trucks just scare a dog. I mean, you see the cats running for them. You could drive right out of the parking lot and be gone. And the question is, are you ready right now? Are you where you need to be right now in order to become a person in that beautiful environment up there where there's no tears, no pain, no crying? I want you to be there. And that's the program. That's how it started. It worked. We have a record of it. It spread all over. It spread so much that they started persecuting them in Acts 8. And all that did was exacerbate it. It just went everywhere. And here we got one guy that was crucified on the cross and 12 fellows that he sent out. And lo and behold, all over the world today, there are people who claim Christianity because of that. There is no reason we cannot grow here locally. None. There are no excuses. We will not stand before God and say, well, God, we're not really qualified. Jesus, I tried. You said some stuff, and I understood some of it. But if you're a Christian, you're qualified. That's the program. And I would encourage you. Let's use the program God left us in the book. Let's dispense with all these other things that seem to work for other churches. Okay? If I don't find them in the book, they're not working. What works is you and me, individually, finding somebody we love and be courageous and bold enough to tell them, it ain't about me because I ain't smart, but I can tell you what the Bible says. And I love your soul. Please go to heaven with me. And that's what I would beg you this morning. Please go to heaven with me. If you're not right with God, we offer an invitation song as a tradition here so that we just keep your mind focused on what we're talking about this morning. Don't live your life indifferent and don't care. And think about it as we invite you in the song we sing.